Hello, today we have Gabby Bernstein with us. She's the #1 New York Times #1 best-selling author, and today we're going to be talking about the new book that's come out on 2nd of January, I think, in the UK, and that's called Judgement Detox. So thank you for joining us, Gabby.
Thank you for having me with you.
I thought we'd start off by trying to look at why self-criticism and harsh judgment of others seems to be such a modern phenomenon. It seems to be so rife at the moment. Why do you think that is?
I don't think that it's anything new. I think that it's just more heightened now as a result of social media and the divisive times that we're living in. I think that people were always, I think that the judgment was always a pervasive issue. It's just maybe we were more silent about it before. And we haven't, and not everyone was so public, right? So
very true.
Everyone is a public figure. So we can always have, everyone has an opportunity to have a voice and speak up, and the voices that are being the loudest are often the most judgmental. So that feels like a very big issue that's definitely at the forefront of the times that we're living in.
Yes, because perhaps it wasn't so widespread in the past because we didn't have access to people's judgments of us, so we wouldn't hear them.
Or as acceptable, or I mean, these days it's like it's almost acceptable to be judgmental. We see it everywhere, and it's like it's become such an issue that we almost rely on it in a way.
Yes, yeah. But our own self-criticism, our own self-judgment, which seems to be at the root of this, that's less visible, isn't it?
Well, I think that our self-judgment is something that we are very obviously shameful of, and we can sometimes not even be aware of. It can happen all day long, but we may not even be conscious of how judgmental we are, because it becomes this natural voice that we just believe is the thoughts that we have in our mind, though none of those thoughts are truly real. And the belief systems of self-judgment we avoid by projecting onto others. So the reason that we judge others is because we don't want to feel the judgment that we have towards ourselves. Yeah. And so this is the judgment cycle. It's just a projection out of what we don't want to feel within.
Yeah, so one of the key elements in the book is very practical, and I did enjoy it, by the way. Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Yeah, it's very practical. And it's actually a 6-step program, in effect, isn't it, that you can follow. And one of the key elements for me throughout the book is love. Why is love so crucial to this way of getting out of self-criticism and self-judgment?
Well, love is what we're returning to. So we, in our true nature, are all kind, compassionate, loving, generous, interconnected people. We detour into fear, and we separate from that connection to love. And that's what builds up this judgment cycle of judging ourselves, judging others, judging ourselves again, judging others. And that separation becomes an addictive pattern. So what this book does is it returns you to love through the practices of undoing the belief systems that have held you back and the belief systems that have separated you. So that's what these 6 steps do. They're a process of undoing, unraveling, and returning to the presence of love.
Yes. And the 6 steps are quite separate from each other, so you can do it, but you can't actually cherry pick with the book. Presumably you have to work your way through the system.
You can. My hope is that readers will go through the 6 steps because they have a cumulative effect, and they will support and build upon one another. And then once they've gone through the 6 steps and had the experience of the judgment detox, then they can cherry pick. They can go back and say, oh, I love this practice. I'm going to use this daily, or I'm going to use this in the morning, so that it doesn't have to be a rigid practice, but I did create the steps in order for a reason. Yes.
And it's very much based on your own experiences of recognizing that you were finding yourself in a place of judgment. You've worked this stuff through yourself. So was there any one of those 6 steps that you found harder than all the others, or was there anything that you found more challenging than the rest?
Well, the whole book was quite challenging for me to apply because I'm very judgmental. So like most human beings, we have daily habits of judgment. So I think that the more I applied the steps, the easier the next step became, because it was written in that way. And so I had the experience personally when I was applying these steps that I hope the reader will have, which is that as you apply each step, the steps get easier.
Yeah, I thought it's very interesting that one of the things that I found very powerful about the book was that you say you're not going to banish judgment from your life completely. This isn't the aim of the book. It's knowing how to deal with it when those thoughts arise. It's knowing how to keep it in your life, but keep it in perspective and not to act on it. And that's very, very practical. So basically it's not believing the thoughts that you tell yourself.
That's right. So the goal of the book isn't that we just abolish our judgment. The goal is that we don't believe in it anymore. And that's ultimately what will happen, which is that you'll witness yourself in a judgmental pattern and you'll see it and you'll say, oh, that's just not me.
Yes.
And it's the practice of realizing that that's not the truth of who you are. That's not what you choose to believe. That's not who you want to be.
And is that a lifetime's work? Is that something we have to work on throughout our life, do you think?
Yes. Because the thing is that there's such a strong pull from the world around us that's the opposite of these belief systems. So I believe that's why we call it a spiritual practice. It's not something like the spiritual day of our life. It's our spiritual practice that we want to be able to continue to practice for the rest of our life, to continue to get closer to consciousness. And that's the devotion that we make as spiritual students. We create a devotional path that we're saying we're going to do this and we're going to make a commitment and we're going to stay consistent.
One of the outcomes of banishing judgment from your life, according to the book, is that you get back to oneness, you get back to peace. And do you think this is a state that we will then recognize from childhood, or do you think this is new to most people, that they've never really truly known oneness and peace?
I think that we were born with that oneness and peace, and we separated from it. The moment we were born, we began the separation. The fears of the world were projected onto us. So I think that, of course, as young children, we were much more innocent and we were much more connected. And as the years went on, that connection has dissolved, and we want to reclaim it. And that reclamation can happen through these practices.
The thing about it is trying to get back to peace and oneness is something that you don't necessarily have to be almost on a spiritual path for. If you're not looking to understand consciousness, you can still get a lot from this book, perhaps. So is it aimed at all levels? Is it something in there for people who've been on a seeking for a long time?
It's aimed for anyone who's willing to feel better. Yeah,
to feel better in themselves. You draw a lot in the book on the wisdom of Kundalini Yoga, EFT, A Course in Miracles, amongst other things in there. These are quite complex systems in a way. How hard was it to make these very complex and ancient systems in some cases accessible to people in the modern world?
Well, that's what I do. That's my job. It's not hard for me because I've dedicated the last 15 years to devoting my life to translating and demystifying these principles for modern day seekers. So it's not hard for me because these are the practices that I apply in my day-to-day life. So they're like another language that I speak fluently. And so I can translate pretty well.
And is there a hope that one of these aspects will resonate with people and that they will go into it into more depth then? Or do you think it's enough just to introduce people maybe?
Both. I think that the hope is that they'll take something from this practice and they'll say, this is something I'm going to live with and practice daily and master in my own life. But even if they just have a taste of it, that's enough.
That's brilliant. And what do you think is next after Judgment Detox? What is it that you're going to be moving on to?
Well, I have another book I'm working on in my mind called Super Attractor.
Ah.
It's sort of like the next level of my book, The Universe Has Your Back. So that's a book I'm starting to talk about and think about. I always think about books at least 2 years ahead.
Does the book that you're writing, did writing Judgment Detox inform your decision about the next book? Is that how it works?
No, the universe has your back informed my decision about Judgment Detox, because in the universe has your back, there was a chapter about judgment. And so in that chapter, I was like, this is actually more than just a chapter. This is a book. And so that happened there. And then the next book, I think that the universe tells me what to write. Honestly, I'm going to be very forthcoming about that. I just get a hit and I know that this is what is supposed to come.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I wish you all the very best with Judgment Detox. I think many, many people can benefit from it. It's certainly around at the moment, and we see so much of it. And so I wish you all the very best with it. And thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you. Thank you.